How's it going, everyone? Gear in here, bringing you guys the new episode, or the newest episode of the Virtual Drift Report, episode 3. Before we get started here, let's take care of some sponsors and partners, starting off with the Godfathers. They was organizers for the event. Spitsy was also an organizer that helped out for VFD this weekend. We have Infamous Creations, or you guys may know him as OG Draco. And we have Madhouse, or their Facebook page is Madhouse, facebook.com/Madhouse. And we have the White J Media that helped along with the promo. So please give these guys a good shout out. Today we're going to be covering the Virtual Formula Drift Pro 2 Round 1 that was on Daytona infield. Now the field was a really large field. We had 61 qualifiers, the largest since Forza 4. Before we get started off into things, I'd like to apologize for the audio issues from the previous round and everything. So let's get started off with the top 3 qualifying runs. Kicking things off with JSI Danny. His best score was a 91. He entered very well. Hugged the inside line for the inside clipping point. Transition really good. Moved his core up to the outside clipping point. And had a really good last transition to the last turn, which gave it a 91. Coming in at number 2, we had the Real Big Pete, coming in with a score of 96. The run was a really smooth run, and by the way, he is on sim steering on a spring back wheel. Now this is pretty hard to do, guys, but really good run from the Real Big Pete. Coming in at number 1, we had JSI Rotom with a score of a 97. Entry was really good for him. Coming around the first turn, really nice. Transition nicely into the second clipping point. Pushes his car to the outside. Coming into the last transition, hits the last clip really well for the score of a 97. Now, as you guys see here, this is the rest of the bracket, how everything placed in. We're going to be doing some notable battles from the top 16 here. Kicking it off with Gainspeed versus StarLux Sismic. Sismic followed. Entry was really good for both drifters. A bit correction for Gainspeed. Didn't really phase Sismic at all. Got right back towards his door. Really good run for Sismic. Really put down a decent follow run, which gave the advantage to Sismic for that run. Gainspeed was followed next run. Entry was a little bit shallow, but got around. Proximity was still close. Transition was good for both drivers. A little bit of a bobble for game, which caused a little bit of a proximity gap and gave Sismic the win for that battle, and he'll move up. Next battle, we had Extreme N64 versus StarLux Deck. Deck would follow first run. Entry was a little bit off, dropped the tire into the dirt, but still we managed to get near him or maintain proximity, coming around the course, coming around to the second clipping point. Extreme is putting down a really good lead run. Deck had to shallow a little bit of angle to catch back up, but at the end of that run, 64 would get the advantage. Following run, Deck pretty much did the same thing that 64 did, put on a really good run. 64 had a little bit of bobble after the second turn. Coming into the last turn, a little bit of gap, and we get it one more time. One more time run, Deck would follow. This time Deck came around the turn much better. 64 fell off the first clipping point and had a bit correction. And from there, Deck maintained to stay on his door throughout the rest of the run. And we gave that a slight advantage to Deck. Now following run, 64 had a little bit of gap on the entry, and from there Deck ran away with the rest of the run. So from the end results of this run, the win would go to StarLux Deck. Moving on to the top 8, as you see here, this is the top 8 bracket. So getting started off with JSI Rhythm versus HKS Mr. Bucket. Bucket would follow for the first run. Coming after the 50 row, I don't know why Bucky gave him a little bit of gap, but maintained to make it up on the entry. Coming out really good for both drivers. It's just that Bucket had a really late transition and caused Rotom to pull a big gap and gave that a big advantage to JSI Rotom. Following run, Rotom would follow. Entry was really good by both drivers. Rotom was right on his door. Transition was really good, nice and early to maintain proximity. Both drivers hit the outside clipping point. Now that was contact, and we gave that an advantage until Bucket dropped 2 at the end. Rotom would get the win. Next battle, we had Show Off A Lot versus DW Crypto. Crypto will be following for the first run. Entry was a little bit sketchy for Show Off A Lot. Crypto came in really good. Crypto gave him some room, came out of that turn into the transition. He made the proximity up just a little bit coming towards the end of the run. Then on the last turn, Show Off A Lot pushed it too hard and dropped 3 at the end, which gave it an advantage to Crypto. Show Off A Lot would follow next run. Entry was really good for Crypto. A little bit off, the first clipping, but really good. Show Off A Lot maintained a little bit of proximity, and he pushed it too hard coming towards the outside and almost spun. So the win would go to DW Crypto. Next battle on the list, we would have the real Big Pete versus StarLux Sismic. Sismic would follow. Entry was really nice for both drifters, but just coming out of that turn and knowing that Pete is on the wheel and on Sim, the transition was a little bit too much for Sismic, and Big Pete pulled a huge proximity gap, which gave that an advantage to the real Big Pete. Following run, Pete would follow. Entry was really good. This was a really good entry for Pete. Close proximity coming out of the turn. Transition was really nice for him. Stayed on his door throughout the entire run. And the win would go to the real Big Pete. Last battle of the top 8, we have StarLux Deck versus JSI Danny. Deck would follow for this run. Coming out of the 50 row, entry was really good for both drivers, hugging that inside line. A little bit of angle correction for Deck. Transition was alright for both drivers, but that competition on HC was just a little bit too much for that run. Danny did drop from that tire, did drop a tire right there, but we gave it a slight advantage to Danny. Following run, Danny had a big mistake on entry. Coming out of the first turn, he did manage to make up a little bit of a proximity, but at the end of the run, judges decided to give that a run one more time. As you also seen, that Deck did drop 2 tires. Following run on the one more time run, Deck would follow. Deck gave him a huge gap on entry. We don't know why, but he managed to make a little bit up out of the first turn, but it was still a little bit too much of a gap to make up, and run would go to, or advantage would go to JSI Danny. Following run, Danny on entry, he learned from his mistake and gave him a little bit of gap, and on the entry, Deck did have that mistake that we gave fault to him, so it was not Danny's fault. Danny maintained to keep proximity throughout the rest of the run, and we will give the win to JSI Danny. As you see the bracket here, we have Rotom, Crypto, Pete, and Danny in the final 4. First battle, we get started off with JSI Rotom versus DW Crypto. Crypto would follow. Entry was really nice by both drifters, hugging the inside line, but the R34 V8 power R34 was just a little too much for Crypto, pulling a really huge gap and giving that advantage run to JSI Rhythm, and Crypto also dropped 4, which pretty much zeroed him out as well. Follow and run. Rhythm coming into the entry. Really nice coming in the entry, hugging the inside line. Crypto's putting down a really good lead run as well. Rhythm managed to stay on his door, coming out of the outside clipping point as well. And for the rest of the run, it was pretty much Rhythm. So, Big Pete and Danny was our next battle up. Danny would follow, coming in the entry. Really nice entry for both drivers, inside line. Just the transition, and Pete is on sim, and just that's where the gap got pretty much created, and it was just nothing that Danny could do for the rest of that run, which gave a big advantage to the real Big Pete. Next run, Pete would follow. Really good entry. Judges thought that there was contact, but there wasn't, and it was just a really nice follow run for Pete. He managed to make up a little bit of that proximity as well. Coming into the last turn, it's just really nice run for Pete, and Pete would get the win. Next battle we had was DW Crypto versus JSI Danny for the 3rd place battle. Crypto would follow. A little bit of proximity gap for Crypto, but he managed to make it up on the entry. Both drivers hugging the inside line really well. Transition was nice by both drivers, but from the rest of the run and on, the 8C was a little bit too much for Crypto. And coming to the last turn, you would see, and the advantage would go to JSI Danny. Following run, Danny would follow. Really nice entry. Coming into the first turn, both drivers would hug the inside line. Transition was really good for both drivers. Managed to hit the outside line or zone, and rest of the run was a really close line, a really close proximity to say for Danny, and 3rd place would go to JSI Danny. Now coming to our finals was the real Big Pete versus JSI Rhythm. Now guys, this was a really good battle here. Entry was really good, slight contact on entry, but still didn't phase Rhythm at all. Transition was really nice. A little bit of proximity, but he still managed to make it up. Pete did, and we actually gave that a tie run. Coming into the next run, Rhythm on entry, really nice for him. Both drivers hugging the inside line. Transition was really nice. A little bit of an angle correction for Rhythm, but it still wasn't anything major. Proximity was still close, and we had to give that run a one more time. This run here, guys, was probably the best run of the weekend. Pete here just showing you how to follow. Rhythm also put down a really good lead run, showing you how to lead. But guys, this run was just spot on perfect. This is how you're supposed to lead and follow. Follow and run, Rhythm would follow. Entry was really good for both drivers. Coming out of the transition, Pete transitioned a little bit earlier than Rhythm, and which caused that a little bit of gap to be created. It wasn't anything big, but it was still something to look out at because of Pete's following run. And with that said, Pete would win the battle and would win Pro 2 round 1. This is how the rest of the bracket filled out. Pete getting first, Rhythm second, and Danny would be third. As you see, these are the top 10 points standing at the end of Pro 2 round 1. Next upcoming event will be the Pendulum Tuning Garage Drift Tournament, which will be going on November 23rd, and the track will be on Monza. Links is also in the description for that event. Another event coming up will be the Virtual Formula Drift Pro 2 round 2 event, which will be going on November 12th to the 14th, and the track will be on Brands Hatch. Link will also be in the description for that. So that was summing up for the Virtual Drift Report episode 3. Guys, leave a rate, comment, and also give a subscribe. And thank you guys for watching.